Councillors and gallery, can I have your attention please? I welcome you all to this meeting of the Cardinia Shire Council to declare the meeting open. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live over the internet on our council website. It's good to see so many people present this evening in our gallery. I do request that you be respectful while you are here with us tonight, and I will not tolerate any interruptions or interjections with respect to my fellow councillors. Councillors will also be available after the meeting if any member of the gallery wishes to discuss any of the items we're discussing tonight. I'll start with the prayer. We always commence with a prayer. Almighty God, we humbly request that you bestow your blessings upon this council. Direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of your glory and betterment of the peoples of Cardinia Shire. Amen. The Cardinia Shire Council respectfully acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Bunurong and the Wurundjeri people. With respect to the... Doug? Yeah, with respect to the elders past, present and future. I note that we have received several apologies for this evening. Councillor Ryan is on leave. Councillor Ross is in Canberra on council business and standing in for me at the National Growth Areas Alliance meeting, and Councillor Springfield unfortunately is not well this evening. So we've got 3 councillors missing. And I want to thank Councillor Jodie Owen for swapping sides to balance the tables up. Thank you. Can I have a notice of motion, please, to adopt the minutes of the meetings as listed? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Jodie Owen's a mover. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Letitia Wilmot. All those in favour? Carried. Councillors, are there any declarations of interest to this evening for this meeting? The council conducts its meetings accordingly to the consent agenda. Councillors have advised of the matters for consideration for this evening that they wish to discuss or debate. The remaining items will be adopted without discussion. The items withdrawn for discussion this evening are Item 1, the Planning Scheme Amendment C244, the Parking Overlay, withdrawn by Councillor Michael Schilling. Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight I'd like to move the recommendation that Council endorse the Pakenham Parking Precinct Plan, 18th of February 2019, for the purposes of presentation to a planning panel. Consider all submissions received during the exhibition of Planning Scheme Amendment C244 and refer all submissions received under Section 23 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 to an independent planning panel to be appointed by the Minister for Planning for consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Can I have a seconder for this recommendation? Seconded, Councillor Jodie Owen. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Schilling. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Owen, for seconding this. So this item is essentially a piece of work which will make sure there's adequate car parking supply within the activity centre of Pakenham. The whole idea of this plan came about during the consultation process of the Pakenham Structure Plan 2017, where local residents fed back to Council that there were significant issues around car parking within the town centre. And when this feedback came back to us, it was no surprise. Central Ward councillors, we can all agree, as we all live in our wards, something needed to be done. So with the Pakenham Structure Plan increasing higher densification and expansion of business within central Pakenham, this will inevitably further compound the issue of car parking supply within the town centre. And the idea of having that thriving local economy requires people to be able to access all areas with ease, minus the issues of congestion and the inability to find a car park when they go to access these services. When Council receives an application for a new commercial development, the applicant is required to demonstrate that they can provide an adequate amount of car parking to cater for their business purposes. And if they can't get that adequate supply of car parking, they'll quite often ask Council for a car parking reduction. And frequently, Council will approve this request. I believe at times that these requests to to have a reduction in car park is incredibly unwise from a council point of view, particularly in a growth area where we're increasing identification. It is really compounding a problem into the long run and I guess making bigger issues for future councils ahead. A major part of this planning scheme amendment is to implement a car parking overlay within commercial areas of the activity centre. This will allow council a mechanism to collect a monetary contribution from new businesses that cannot provide the adequate amount of car parking mandated by the council. I'd just like to reinforce that one point because it can be a little bit confusing and has been a little bit ambiguous. This does not apply to existing businesses already in the activity centre or new businesses who can provide adequate parking. The money collected from this scheme will be reinvested into new public car parks and also upgrade existing council car parks as well. During the exhibition of this amendment, which is C244, from the 4th of October to the 6th of November, we received a total of 6 submissions from the community. 1 was in support of this and 5 were opposing. These objections, in summary, spoke about the exceptions of not-for-profit organisations if they can't provide adequate car parking, the use of private car parks, and in particular around council's ability to be able to enforce parking regulations that are set by a private business owner, which could be quite challenging. There were some of these objections which couldn't be resolved from council staff. Therefore, it was deemed appropriate that these objections be heard by an independent panel who can then report back to council on these recommendations. So that's another thing that I'm asking for tonight. There is no doubt that this parking plan, as I said before, is well and truly overdue. We've conducted a significant research study of our activity centre within the main street around car parking. Technically, we do have adequate supply of parking within the activity centre, and I say technically because the activity centre is quite a sizable area which isn't always inconvenient access to shops and essential services for people. Our research showed out of 4,177 available car parks, at peak times we did have a 62% occupancy. As I said, it doesn't allow for convenience, it doesn't allow easy access for people with mobility issues, and not always in close proximity to the facilities that our community are wanting. This is compounded by people breaching time restrictions in the 79 very short-term parking spots which we have available in our main street. This is combined with a lack of council resources to provide education on alternate parking where residents are permitted to stay for a longer period of time. When I speak about this, I'm not talking about traffic infringements. I think quite often fining is quite a regressive way of changing behaviour. I think it's more around education and having those resources to do it. And there is always a joke, if you get a fine from a Cardinia parking officer, you're one of the most unlucky people around because we only have one. So I'd just like to highlight another part of this parking plan is around sustainable transport. And I understand that cars will play a role in our communities for a long time to come. But in terms of sustainable transport, this plan talks a lot about encouraging improved cycling routes, better connectivity for public transport users, and even mentions the future use of electric car charging stations. What we have to remember is the Pakenham Structure Plan, which this is sort of an offshoot of, has a 20-year expiry. So 20 years is a long time. If we think back 20 years ago where technology was to where it is now, we have to be very quick to be able to adapt. And this plan does look into the future, particularly as we look at increasing densities in the main street. There will be higher uptake of public transport use and people wanting to cycle in and around the activity centre. This plan is, as I said, is important to allow access to the town's services and facilities. When we were coming up with this plan, we did have a car parking reference group, so I'd like to thank them very much for their input during this plan. That was Dominic, Tony O'Hara, Michael Porter, Terry Baldwin and David Young, who were all involved. And I see that Tony is in the gallery tonight, so I'd like to thank them for their valuable contribution. This is something that these residents have done in their own time to help support council, and I'm very grateful for that. So in conclusion, I'm asking councillors tonight to consider the 6 submissions that we have received and endorse this plan for the purpose of a planning panel. And I also look forward to hearing my colleagues' thoughts on this comprehensive plan for the future parking in our activity centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Well spoken. To the seconder, Councillor Jodie Allen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be supporting Councillor Schilling in this item, and actually just tonight I've had a couple of conversations with people pertaining to parking. Although we still look at Pakenham as still a little bit rural and things aren't where they're going to be. If you go around James, John Street and other places, you already see that people are selling off large pieces of land and turning them into townhouses. And although at the moment it's not an issue, I think it just makes sense to have this ready to go, so as in years to come we don't have to worry about what we can bring to town and what cannot come due to not having parking. So although it's not something that's popular, it's not something that we like to think about all the time, but we do hope with our development that people can park in one location and access everything they need for the day. But in doing this, if people do have access issues or other needs, then they will be able to access parking exactly where they need. So I'll support Councillor Schilling on this, and I also ask my fellow councillors to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Any other speakers, either for or against? Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, the previous council speakers. Definitely this has been long awaited. I remember when I first started on council back in 2005, car parking reductions was a hot issue and council couldn't force applicants to pay for car park shortfall. So that was a real frustration. We were seeing restaurants and offices getting permits, whether it was via VCAT, and without a mechanism. This will ensure a mechanism for council to charge anyone who are seeking car park reductions to go into a bucket of money to improve car parks. This is mainly the James Street site. At the moment it's a gravel car park. Using the funds from this parking overlay, council will improve that car park with obviously lighting and ceiling, etc. So I think this is long awaited and I look forward to the implementation when it eventually occurs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Well said. Any other speakers? Before I go back to the mover, Councillor Schilling, I'd just like to say it was the community consultation was just fantastic in Main Street in Pakenham. There was a caravan there and the staff from planning were there to answer all the questions and all the suggestions put forward from the community. So it was a really good result. And the document is a really well-written document. I urge the gallery and the community to read the document. It's well worthy of that long-term vision that we have for the Pakenham Centre. But I'll go back to the mover to sum up. Councillor Schilling, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to both the Councillor Owens for their contributions as well. Look, one of the great things I think about council in general is our ability to be able to plan for the future, and this document really is a bit of a future piece of work that we will look back in years to come and see its full impact, and that's particularly around collecting the monetary contributions from new businesses that are unable to provide the car parking which is mandated. So I look forward to, whether it's 5-10 years, seeing the improved car parking facilities that council own as well. There are also some shorter term outcomes in this plan, and that's around reviewing parking restrictions and shorter term use parking. As I alluded to in my opening statement, it's important that we do, as a council, not fine people into compliance, but get people out there on the street, council officers, to educate people around where to park in the activity centre, whether that's in the form of written literature, signage, staff time. I think that's important. A lot of people probably don't know that there are parking restrictions within our main street, and there are stories of people that will park there all day, and that does not free up easy access in and out of the main street. So look, there are some great longer term goals with this plan, but there are also some shorter term goals which council officers are already implementing. As you can see, and the public will be able to see in the report, there are some that are already ticked off in this plan that we're already working towards. Look, that's great news. So this is really an important piece of work that we might not see the benefits straight away, but we definitely will in the future. So I hope that I have council support today to get the objections to a planning panel so we can bring it back and officially endorse this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Okay, all those in favour? For? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 2, the CEO Employment Matters Committee, withdrawn by Councillor Brett Owen. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following. That Council 1, adopt the Chief Executive Officer Employment Matters Policy as attached. 2, appoint an advisory committee called the Chief Executive Officer Employment Matters Committee, comprising of independent chairperson, mayor, previous 2 mayors, with the option to include a suitable facilitator to assist the committee to discharge its obligations. And 3, appoint Mr. Alan Borden as the independent chair of the committee. I move so.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wilmot. Back to you, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Wilmot. During the recruitment and selection process of Ms. Carol Jeffs as the Chief Executive Officer CEO, it was agreed that Council should develop and adopt a Chief Executive Officer employment policy, as proposed in the local government bill currently before the Victorian Parliament. The attached draft policy has therefore been drafted to satisfy this requirement. I'm really pleased about these proposed changes. My experience on the CEO performance sort of review committee has been quite interesting, and this is my experience I'm speaking from. I can't talk on anyone else's, but I found the previous process ad hoc, inconsistent. Really depends on the mayor, how he or she chairs that sort of performance. It lacked a independence. So I welcome these proposed changes. I think it's really good. I welcome this policy. The role of the CEO Matters Committee is detailed in the policy, and this is the committee shall ensure that the CEO is consulted and advised of the process. In consultation with the CEO, identify and agree the performance plan goals and activities that the CEO should work towards achieving over a 12-month period. Ensure that the CEO submits a performance plan template report and is given the opportunity to present his or her self-assessment to the council. Ensure all councillors are invited to provide comments of appraisal of the CEO's performance to the committee. Attend to the collection and collation of council feedback in relation to the CEO's performance as measured against the performance plan approved by the council. Review the CEO's remuneration package as a component of the annual review and report to the council regarding the CEO's performance review. In this motion, we're appointing Mr. Alan Borden as independent chair of committee. We as council went through expression of interest, and we believe Alan has the background and the experience to undertake the role. He's the previous CEO of the neighbouring Bass Coast Shire Council, and we think he's well qualified. So I look forward to this committee commencing its activities. I think it's a great approach, a fresh approach, something that I welcome the proposed changes. I think it's a great outcome. So I welcome other councillors' thoughts. Thank you.
Well done, Councillor Owen. I'll move to Councillor Wilmot as a seconder.
Thank you, and I'm more than happy to support this this recommendation tonight. I think this is a very good step that we're doing here, and it'll certainly give support to the councillors that are on the review committee, but it'll also give some reassurance to the CEO that things are being handled correctly. The gentleman that we've appointed to the role, Mr. Borden, is very experienced within local government and has worked as CEO, as Councillor Owen has outlined. So he has got a wealth of experience behind him. He knows how these things should be done, and it will be his role to make sure that they are done consistently and appropriately throughout whoever is CEO at that time. So I think this is a really good step. obviously it's a recommendation in the review of the Local Government Act that this is the way all councils move. So we're actually being a little bit ahead of the steps here and doing it early rather than waiting for it to be something that we have to do. But I think this is a very positive thing, and as I say, it'll give support to councillors and to the CEO, and I think Mr Bowden should be a very appropriate person to do that role, and I look forward to meeting him at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Any other speakers, either for or against? No other speakers? I'll go back to the mover, Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. And yeah, I totally agree with your comments about supporting councillors on that committee. You know, not all councillors are well qualified in reviewing staff performance, and that's definitely something I've struggled in my time on such a committee. And to have a independent chair having the option to engage a facilitator to undertake that, I think is a good way forward. Having at least 4 meetings a year quarterly, I think that is great. I think the current system that we had, you know, probably the last 3 months of the year, we would start thinking about the performance of the CEO, thinking about, you know, future KPIs and so forth, but having a quarterly approach to it, I think is really good governance. So I welcome this policy and the committee, and I think the committee is meeting this Wednesday, I think, for the first time. So we look forward to that, and councillors on that committee will obviously report back to councillors and council as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillors, all those in favour? For? Against? Carried. Item 3, the lease to the Pakenham Auto Club, 21 Key Lane, also withdrawn by Councillor Brett Owen. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following, that 1, Council commences the statutory procedures under sections 190 and 223 of the Local Government Act 1989, the Act by giving public notice in the local paper circulating in the area of Pakenham advising of the proposal to lease 21 Key Lane, Pakenham, to the Pakenham Auto Club Incorporated. 2, in the event of submissions being received, sorry, I do have an alternative motion, I forgot to mention that, and I am going to include that as I speak. So for 2, in the event of submissions being received, a committee comprising of ward councillors and Councillor Brett Owen be appointed, and the Chief Executive Officer be authorised to set the day and time and place for hearing of such submissions. And 3, following the public notice process, the matter will be reported to Council to consider a proposal to lease 21 Key Lane, Pakenham. So, Mayor, I move that alternative motion, which basically includes just me as well in the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Good pick up there. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Michael Schilling. Back to you, Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Long history. Motorsports in Cardinia Shire, Pakenham. It dates back since 1972 when the Pakenham Auto Club started. They've been on privately owned land. They've been on reservations that's turned into freeways. They've been utilising the McGregor Road site on basically a temporary basis. The Auto Club has 300 current members. Probably over 2,000 members have gone through that club over time. So to get to this point is I think is really good, and I'm really happy about this because I know motorsports is so important. We talk about football, cricket, netball, but we often forget about motorsports, and that is a real legitimate recreation. And for a club to have 300 members is a great indication. So I'll go to the report. So Council, on the meeting on the 28th of May 2018, resolved in part to offer Lot 1 at the 335 McGregor Road to the Pakenham Auto Club for their permanent use, subject to Council's compliance with its statutory obligations. So since then, Officers have been working with the Motorsport Steering Committee, and councillors are on that committee as well, to establish the future use of the precinct land. Negotiations have been ongoing with the club to negotiate the essential terms of the lease in order to consider a proposal to lease 21 Key Lane, Pakenham, to the club. Council required to undertake through statutory procedures under Section 190 of the Local Government Act and hear submissions in accordance with the Local Government Act. So Council is proposing a lease of 20 years and then an option of further 20 years for a rental of $104 per annum. So this will give at least 40 and ultimately 40 years reassurance to the Pakenham Auto Club to undertake their activities. And I think, I'm hoping all councillors support this, but I think this is a great outcome. That's what the Pakenham Auto Club wanted, is certainty, so they can, construct tracks, build clubhouses, and really, flourish their club and attract more members. So I ask councillors to support this process to undertake the procedures for the proposed lease. We do have the side problem with the Coorab Motorcycle Club, and we continue to work with them. Council has offered them, obviously, I think lot 2. Yep. And the steering committee is working with them to see whether that lot 2 meets their needs. And we know it's going to be very tight for them, but we continue to negotiate with them to hopefully see a lease arrangement put in place. But I think this is very positive news to see some long-term certainty for the Pakenham Auto Club. They well deserve it, and I seek other councillors' comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Schilling, the seconder to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'll support this tonight going out to lease 21 Key Lane. Look, to be very honest, coming onto council, this probably wasn't a topic that I was very well versed in. But look, I've seen through community input, and particularly from the feedback too from Councillor Owen, who's been a tireless champion for the Pakenham Motor Club, of how important it is to them. And I think the biggest theme that has come back to me and that I've observed, it's around that whole issue of permanency and being unsure of where they will be isn't conducive to any club being able to grow. People need a home, and I feel that this is a great way forward, and it's a really good outcome for the club in now being able to grow their club and know that they've at least got 20 years now to go. And look, the history is huge. I know as councillors, when we've received briefing documents, there are hundreds and hundreds of pages worth of information on history. So, look, I'm really happy that we've gotten to this point tonight, and I'll be supporting Councillor Owen in this, and as well as his alternate motion as well, which is going into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Appreciate it. Any other councillors to speak on this item? Councillor Ray Brown. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I support this motion. The Coorab Motorcycle Club, I think, is one of the best run clubs that I've ever seen, and I must say they are probably the most patient club I've ever seen, because we've promised a lot and delivered nothing, and at last we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. We've got this parcel of land. It gives them some surety of their future, and I endorse this wholeheartedly. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other speakers on this item? I'd just like to support Councillor Owen on this. This is a thing that's close to my heart as well. I was a former member of the Pakenham Auto Club. My son and I, we raced a Mini down there. It was a fantastic club. But to think this is about car racing, it's not. It's about families together. This is a really fantastic family club, and the actual committee of management of that club are just so supportive of our community. So you've got to understand, it's an alternative activity. Yes, it's not cricket or football or whatever. It is still an activity where families can get together, and it serves a need for our community. So I think this lease will give them surety. It'll give them security, and enable them, as expressed by my fellow councillors, that they can actually build structures, infrastructure on this site and have an actual home. We're going to give them a home, and that's really very, very important to us. But I want to thank you, Councillor Owen, for bringing up and your support for this over a long period, and I acknowledge that. So back to you, Councillor Owen, to sum up. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for speaking on it. I just want to remind Council, back on the 20th of May, all councillors supported this direction, as in offering Lot 1 to the Pakenham Auto Club. So all councillors at that meeting supported that. So I thank all councillors. We made tough decisions on that night, and I just want to thank you for your commitment to that. As I said, long history. Back in 2011, the Minister for Planning changed the zoning for this block of land to allow a motorsports facility which included accommodation for our two local motorcycle auto clubs, Pakenham Auto Club and the Cockatoo Motorcycle Club. So I got briefed on it today. I just want to get my facts right, but part of the reasoning why this was rezoned from Green Wedge to a special use zone to allow motorsports activity was to provide accommodation for our two local motorsports clubs, and I think that's really important. Why council sought that rezoning, that change, and I know the two clubs advocated very strongly to the Minister and the government MPs to allow that to change for that purpose. So got to acknowledge that. So thank you, councillors, for your comments. This does provide that certainty. We as council are still working with the Cockatoo Motorcycle Club. We'd like to arrange a similar lease arrangements, but we're tackling a few issues and mainly around the size that they can operate on. So we'll continue to work with them in a positive manner. I just want to acknowledge the great work of our staff, Doug Evans and Mike Ellis, who have been working really hard since that steering group started, because I think we're all on the one page that we need to see this finally resolved after the long history. So thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor, and I also second that acknowledgement of our staff. They did a fantastic job with this. So, councillors, all those in favour? For? Carried. Next item, item 4. Amendment to meeting procedure local law, withdrawn by Councillor Michael Schilling. Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight I'd like to move that Council amends Local Law 19, Meeting Procedure Amendment Local Law 2018, so that Clause 59 is not deleted, but amend to read as follows. 59, Supplementary Questions. At the discretion of the chairperson, a member of the gallery whose question has been answered may be permitted to ask a supplementary question if that question is designed to clarify the answer given. As such, supplementary question will not be a multiple question for the purposes of Clause 58. The recommendation also has another 3 points which you'll see in our papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Could I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Owen. Back to you, Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors will remember that we sought to investigate the most appropriate way to deal with community question time. That was post the implementation of our live streaming, where we potentially had an issue with a local resident who perhaps disclosed a little bit too much information about their neighbour on the live stream, which could have, in hindsight, caused some harm if that neighbour had seen some of those comments which were made here in the council chamber. So the real issue came about, it was risk. Risk was brought up. Given some of the complexities around live streaming and liability, there was some discussion around potentially stopping supplementary questions. And from day one, I've strongly spoken against stopping supplementary questions. I believe that sets council backwards. And I've mentioned to this council before in briefings that benchmarking against other councils is a positive thing to do. 100%, we must benchmark when we have when there's an area perhaps that we're underperforming in and we want to see what the public are doing differently. are doing differently. But when we're ahead of the pack, I'm not willing to go backwards and disallow supplementary questions. I think it's a real strength to us as a council to give our community the opportunity to be able to ask a supplementary question. After all, the community have elected us to sit here around the table. They ask a question. If the question isn't clarified properly, or there's an element of their question that they feel wasn't answered, I feel that it's perfectly reasonable for the community to be able to ask a supplementary question. I am happy with this revised local law as it does allow the supplementary questions to go ahead, but at the discretion of the chairperson. I do think this additional wording is very appropriate as it will minimise a free-for-all which we've previously seen in the gallery. I believe there was a time last year where potential community question time probably wasn't handled with as tight parameters as what it potentially could be, and it did result in a little bit of an open forum. If residents want to discuss issues beyond a question time, for councillors, our details are all made available. Always happy to have a conversation. Always happy to stay back after meetings and chat to the gallery. So look, I think it's important that that additional clause is put into the local law, because meetings at the end of the day do have to be kept professional, and they do have to be kept within our procedures. But I do believe that community question time and supplementary question times are a huge strength, and I certainly won't be voting for this to stop. Look, quite frankly, I do believe by stopping community question time and going back to the original thoughts, we're essentially placing a gag on local democracy. And while I'm sitting around this table, I won't be supporting that. I think it's important to go ahead. And as I said, an important strength of this council and how we operate. I look forward to hearing my fellow councillors' thoughts on this, but what I would like to say is just because something is live streamed, it doesn't mean that there's not parameters and procedures that can be put in place that will mitigate risk to the community. As a council, there's risk in everything that we do. There's risk to the gallery, leaving a council meeting at night time when it's wet outside, somebody could trip over. There's risks in everything that we do. And whilst I'm not saying that community question time and supplementary question time shouldn't have rules around it, there are certainly highly effective ways that we're able to mitigate that risk as a council. And if it got to the point where we were concerned about supplementary questions, we have an operator who's operating cameras here on a Monday night. It's as simple as turning the volume down on the camera when the community are asking a supplementary question. There are very simple things that technology allows us to do, and I'm more than happy to look into those if it arises in the future. But to me, the risk that we have from supplementary questions is incredibly minimal, and it's a mild risk that I'm willing to take if it means a community can have their say. But very interested to hear on other councillors' views on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Seconded to speak, Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Schilling. I support you in this motion. I definitely, as a councillor, did not want to see supplementary questions canned, and I think this clarification reminder that a supplementary question is designed to clarify the answer given, and I think we need to obviously, focus on that. It's really up to the chairperson, the mayor, to ensure that takes place, but that's the intention, is to clarify a answer. And fair enough, because unfortunately sometimes questions aren't answered to the full extent as a resident is seeking. So to seek clarification on the original answer and the question, to get the exact answer, I think is important, and I think that's something that residents should expect. But really, the chairperson, the mayor, has a key role in this, in calling out where questions become statements and so forth like that. So big job, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure you're up to it, and future mayors ahead. So so I support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen, for your positive comments. Any other speakers either for or against? Councillor Letitia Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a little bit torn over this decision tonight. I was the person that originally moved a notice of motion to remove the supplementary questions from the local law. And the reasoning behind that was that we had already stopped supplementary questions because of the incident that Councillor Schilling outlined earlier. and the risk that arose from the statements and comments that particular resident made in that night. I don't see that allowing this motion to go through tonight has addressed the risk involved. Whilst I'm happy for supplementary questions to be answered, I don't think we've got enough controls in place to make sure the risk is minimised. And it's our job as councillors to make sure that council is exposed to as little risk as possible. And we have the opportunity to do that here, and I don't think we're there yet. I think there's still opportunities to either move the supplementary questions to the beginning of the meeting before the broadcast starts, or to the very end of the meeting after. We could turn off the broadcast before the community questions and just do them separately at the end. So even the forms online that people fill out before they submit their questions could have statements written on there about the supplementary questions, when they will be allowed and when they won't be allowed, etc. I don't think we're there yet with this motion, and for those reasons I won't be voting for it this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Any other speakers, any other councillors for or against this item? Councillor Ray Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a bit like Councillor Wilmot. I don't know whether we've addressed the issue here as to why, in the first place, we barred having supplementary questions. In respect to being ahead of the game, I think we are ahead of the game by recognising the risk of this media distribution of our council meetings. I think it's going to put a big onus on the Mayor. I support Councillor Wilmot that if we could have it before the broadcast, I don't see what that is going to cause any grief to anybody. As I said before, I'm a bit vexed. I like the idea of having an open council. I like the idea of being transparent. What I don't like is sometimes we hear a question and it sort of hangs in the air. It's never been answered. It sort of hangs there, and that person has to seek an officer out afterwards to get a clarification. So I think I'll just keep my powder dry for just a moment and think about it a bit more. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Interesting comment. Yes, any other speakers for or against? No. I don't know about my powder being dry, but I'll just mention something else, if I may, in between, because it's really nice to have a healthy debate on particular items where the councillors are in these particular items. And item 4 is turning into one of those debates, which is fantastic. The other alternative is I've got a kill switch or a kill button up here that can shut all not the councillors down. No, I can't shut the councillors down, even though I'd like to sometimes. But it actually just shuts the microphones off. So therefore, it's a kill switch when it gets down to silence. So therefore, it's another alternative to what can happen in a council chamber. So we have got things in place that can be done. But I'll move back to the go back to the mover to sum up. Thank you, Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Mayor, and look, thank you very much, councillors, for your comments as well. And look, I've always known that this has been an issue that we've all had differences of opinion on, and that's okay. That's we're elected to represent the public, and we don't all come to council with the same views, and I think that's a very healthy thing. Look, I'll be still supporting this tonight. I think that the umbrella local law is still correct. We're saying it's at the discretion of allowing supplementary questions, at the discretion of the chairperson, which is the mayor of the day. The individual policies that we put in place and the individual procedures aren't a local law. A local law is a broad overarching idea that we're allowing supplementary questions. How we implement supplementary questions, the things that we do to mitigate risk for supplementary questions are completely up to the council of the day. So the question tonight is quite simple. Are we going to allow supplementary questions at the discretion of the mayor, or are we not? Procedures around whether or not we turn off the microphones, the mayor uses his or her kill switch, whether or not we put supplementary questions start, middle, third, last part of the meeting. Whenever we do them, they're all things that I think that we can very easily address. To me, just looking at the local law itself, I'm asking tonight that council support the idea that we are open to the idea of supplementary questions at the discretion of the chairperson. Technology changes quick, our environment changes quick, and that's why policies and procedures of a council must adapt to those changes quickly. Local laws are here to stay, and the broad principle of accepting a supplementary question from a resident at the discretion of the chairperson is something that I fully support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Now I'll call for us to vote here. All those in favour? For? Carried. Right. Okay. Thank you, councillors. Well done. Item 5. Environmental Effects Statement, Technical Reference Group, Crib Point, AGL, APA, Gas Import Jetty and Crib Point, Pakenham Gas Pipeline. Withdrawn by Councillor Ray Brown. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. That's quite a mouthful, isn't it? I move the report be noted and council officers advocate as part of the technical reference group to require the pipeline to be located within road reserves where possible.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Michael Schilling. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. The Minister for Planning has advised that an environmental effects statement be undertaken for the importing and degasifying liquid natural gas facility at Crib Point and the provision of a 56 kilometre pipeline from Crib Point to the mains pipeline north of Pakenham be constructed. AGL and APA propose to establish a new facility for importing and degasifying liquefied natural gas and supplying it to the gas transmission network. The proposal comprises the gas import facility works, which include an upgrade and modification works to the existing jetty at Crib Point, to provide for continuous mooring of a floating storage and regasification unit, which they describe as an FSRU, a vessel with LNG storage and regasification capacity. The scheme is that LNG carriers, the tankers, approximately 300 metres in length, will moor alongside the FSRU. This is a floating storage facility, and transfer cargo to the FSRU. The proposal also comprises pipeline works which, after treatment of the gas and transfer via a new pipeline from Crib Point through the municipalities of Mornington Peninsula, Casey and Cardinia to a location north of Princes Highway east of Pakenham. The pipeline will run approximately 56 kilometres from Crib Point to Pakenham. The pipeline will be located within a 30-metre easement. The 30-metre wide easement is required to allow the installation and maintenance of the pipeline. The gas companies will be required to acquire the rights for these easements with consultation. The EES statement involves quite a number of steps before it gets to the final stage of getting to the Minister. It's a draft study program and a draft schedule, the exhibition of draft scoping requirements by DELP, which is the Department of Environmental, Land, Water and Planning. Another acronym is DELP, so I'll refer to them as DELP. Review of the studies and draft documentations by DELP and a technical reference group known as TRG1. This will result in exhibition of the EWS invitation for public comment on behalf of the Minister, and then ultimately goes to the Minister for an assessment of the project and given to the decision makers. In preparation of the EES document, the Environmental Effects document, DELP has convened a technical reference group known as a TRG, comprised of representatives of relevant state government agencies and departments and relevant local council to advise on applicable policies, strategies and statutory provisions, scoping requirements, design and adequacy of technical studies, the proponent's public information and stakeholder consultation program, and the technical adequacy of the draft documentation and coordination of statutory processes. Council officers from Cardinia are part of the TRG, or will be part of the TRG, and will update council as needed on the progress of the TRG and the EES. I'm assuming there are the other councils included in this panel. The policy implications, and there are many with a project of this type, the likelihood of adverse effects and associated uncertainty of available predictions or estimates, the potential impact on individual environmental assets, the magnitude, extent and duration of change in the value of each asset, risk ratings of intended and unintended unforeseeable events such as spills, the likely residual effects that are likely to occur after all proposed measures to avoid and mitigate environment effects are implemented. The proposed pipeline will run through some
I'd use the kill switch if I could have, but I didn't.
Yes. I wouldn't do that to you, Councillor. Take two. The proposed pipeline will run through some of Cardinia's Western Port Green Wedge land and other areas which are zoned special use for agricultural purpose and green wedge. Council's municipal strategic statement relating to agriculture identifies the importance of the Shire's high value in agricultural land and the need to protect it from incompatible and inappropriate development and subdivision, including non-soil based farming of lands with high quality soil. Agricultural land, particular areas of high quality soils, should also be protected from the intrusion of urban uses, inappropriate development and fragmentation, which would lead to a reduction in agricultural viability, the erosion of the right of farmers to farmland, and ultimately the loss of land from agricultural production. The current identified location of the pipeline, this is the location and the route proposed, is to dissect rural parcels of land rather than travel along the road reserve. While at this stage Council cannot formally make a decision on the appropriateness of the pipeline location without consideration of all reports, it is however recommended that Council officers, as part of the TRG, that is Cardinia Shire Council officers, advocate that where possible the pipeline to be located along the road reserves rather through the agricultural land parcels. That's the important bit, that we are going to push as a council to, where possible, the pipeline be located along road reserves. Where the council plan is taken into consideration, which is the balanced needs of development, the community and the environment, and to ensure the planning of rural green wedge area protects and enhances important agricultural, environmental, natural resource, infrastructure and recreational values. APA and AGL have already undertaken community consultation. Mayor and I have been to quite a few of those meetings with the farmers affected by this process. I've been to at least 3, and I think the Mayor's been to at least as many. At the end of the EES process, all reports will be placed on exhibition and the community will be able to make submissions to be heard at an independent panel meeting. The panel will then submit a finalised report to the Minister for consideration. So that's in a nutshell, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. What a great report. Thank you. To the seconder, Councillor Schilling, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep this quite short. I support Councillor Brown tonight with this. Any project of this type of magnitude, I mean, we're talking about 56 kilometres of line from Crib Point to Pakenham. Like that's a huge project. So any project that has the potential to disrupt our agricultural land or disrupt communities, look, we need to give it proper consideration. And I think by looking at this environmental effects statement and having that undertaken, we'll get a real sense of what this project is about and any potential impacts it will have on the environment. So look, at very least, we're able to try and mitigate some of those. The second point of the recommendation around require the pipeline to be located within road reserves where possible. I agree with Councillor Brown, that's also an important part of this. It's important that we have as little disruption as possible to our prime agricultural land. Once these huge projects are built, you're not going to unbuild them. So if they're going to be built, let's make sure that they're done in the most appropriate way possible. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Schilling. Any other speakers? Any other councillors? Before I move back to Councillor Brown, yes, this has been a long process. This is to support our farmers, our local farmers and their families. They actually drove this EES to come to fruition, because the realignment, it was all about realigning the pipeline, and that's what it all came back to when we had meetings with Councillor Brown. And I must make a tribute to someone who had a lot to do with the EES coming out to play and our support of our farmers, was the former member for Bass, Brian Painter, who really had a lot to do with driving that and supporting the local farmers in our Port Ward area, because it was very important to support them and to have the pipeline realigned along those road nature's areas. Makes a lot more sense to protecting our farmland. So I'll go back to Councillor Brown, who did a fantastic job of the presentation. Thanks, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to the other councillors that have spoken. I'll make it pretty brief. The EES process is critical, and as the Mayor said, it was driven by some individuals to get it to this stage. There were some people from Cardinia as well. The mood, I would say, of the community is one of why not. They've suggested other routes, and they're saying why not. They're saying they're not given any reasons why not. However, it is inappropriate for us to make any judgment tonight or at any other time until we see what the results of the EES are, because it may well be that this is the most appropriate route if it's supported by the EES, and our council officers will keep us informed on how that's going and the problems or benefits that they might encounter. So just in summing up, our council office will continue to participate in the TRG and advocate where possible to ensure the pipeline is located along road reserves. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Okay, we signify in the usual manner. All those for? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item number 6, contract number 18/43, Bunyip Soccer Pavilion, withdrawn by Councillor Ray Brown. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council accept the tender sum, quite funny saying that, isn't it? Tender sum, you know, not so hard. Tender sum of 2.165 million, excluding GST, from Inside Construction Group for contract number 18/43 Bunyip Soccer Stadium, and 2, the common seal of council be affixed to the contract documents.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brett Owen. Thank you, Councillor. Back to you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. This report provides consideration for the appointment of a contractor to undertake the pavilion works required at Bunyip Soccer Stadium. This project involves the construction of female-friendly soccer change rooms, standard and universally accessible amenities, referee rooms, first aid kitchen, a social space, meeting room, cleaner store, and communications and storage spaces. The pavilion project is located at the Bunyip Recreation Reserve at Medalla, corner of Medalla and Narnagoon Longorry Roads. The Bunyip Soccer Club has waited a long time for this facility, and Councillor Moore should be commended because it's been one of his babies, and he's pushed it and pushed it and pushed it, and he's finally achieved, and good on him. The community are desperate for a facility like this for probably the fastest growing sport in the area, and I think it's going to do nothing but good for the community. The Bunyip Reserve Master Plan has been developed to meet the growing needs of the community. The new pavilion encompasses community spaces, some social space, meeting rooms for community groups, and a community kitchen and associated garden. It's also meant to provide some facilities for other groups as well as the soccer club. It's been designed that way that other groups can use it. Other groups will be able to approach the Bunyip soccer people and make arrangements to do that, and I'm sure that they'll be welcome to do it. The tender for the Bunyip Soccer Pavilion is advertised on the 17th of November, closed on 18th of December. All tenders were assessed against a range of non-weighted selection criteria to ensure the viability of the tender submissions. Criteria comprised of financial viability, insurances, conditions of contract, conflict of interest, and occupational health and safety. All tenders were also assessed against the weighted criteria of compliance with the specifications, capability and capacity, relevant experience and past performed quality systems and project plan and timelines of the contractor. Following a comprehensive review of the submitted tenders by the evaluation panel, the tender submission by Insight Construction Group with a tender price of $2.165 million, excluding GST, represents the best value for money outcomes for council. The relevance to the council plan, the delivery of this project aligns with council plan initiatives, particularly our people, access to a variety of services for all, access to support services, learning opportunities, and variety of recreation and leisure opportunities. There's been extensive consultation undertaken in the development and design phases of this pavilion. Council obviously consulted with sport and recreation and sought feedback and comments from relevant community groups. In particular, feedback was sought with reference to all-inclusive facilities, which we're getting more of these days, female-friendly facilities, and also used by multiple groups, as I said, in their delivery of simultaneous activities. In addition, there's also been broad internal consultation from related stakeholders, such as community strengthening, active communities, risk, health and safety, governance, building and facilities, and infrastructure services. On a financial base, the budget is $2.760 million, excluding GST, which includes a recommended tender price of $2.165 million, plus approximately $560,000 for the design documentation and portable building costs, which is temporary accommodation while these facilities are being built for the users, project management fees, and universal design requirements. Thus, there are sufficient funds available for this project. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Brett Owen. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Well covered. I just think it's really great that we, as a council, continue to invest in renewed and new facilities for our rural townships. It's really great, council's commitment. So I fully support this. So I note that part of the financial aspects to this, council did receive a Building Better Regions federal government grant. I believe it was $900,000. So we thank the federal government, and I know local member Russell Broadbent was a strong advocate for that. So we thank the federal government because $900,000 goes towards that final cost. But yeah, I fully support this in renewing our older facilities in our rural townships. I think it's really important. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowan. Any other speakers on this subject? So before I go back to Councillor Brown, the mover, I'll give this to Doug so he can shut me up for a moment. You've got to take the smile off my face because this is really something exciting. I know we've got a vote on it as yet, so it's not all over and done with as yet, but to see this facility come to fruition after all these years, it was when I first got on council, you were talking about when you first got on council, Councillor Rowan, this club was in desperate need of this facility, and it's such a big club and it's got bigger and bigger from year after year. So this facility is just going to be fantastic in this club down at Bunyip. So to have it as one of my aspirations as a councillor, to see it come up and alive, nothing makes me happier than that. So it's really good, and I thank my fellow councillor, Councillor Brown, for his support, and thank you, Councillor Owen, for your second there. And of course, we do owe Russell Broadbent a lot for this. That 900,000 made it viable. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been viable through our normal system. So he could see the need. We met down there a few times, so it was exciting stuff. So anyway, I'll go back to the mover, Councillor Brown, and thank you for your kind words as well. It's very nice of you to say. And I'll go back to you to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and I meant what I said. You are a great advocate for your community. We've also got that beautiful tennis pavilion at Bunyip, which is a real treat, and I think the netball share it as well, don't they? So that's a real treat to see that building, and this will complement it. So, yeah, you might have a trifecta here: the stadium, the both of those pavilions. Anyway,
I'm too far ahead of us.
Okay. This project is integral to meeting community expectations, and the Growing Suburbs Fund financial commitment and timeline expectations are very much welcome. As Councillor Owen said, there's $900,000 being put in by the government, and our contribution is $1.86 million. So, Mayor, it is recommended that Council award the contract 18/43 for the construction of the Bunyip Soccer Pavilion to Inside Construction Group for the tender sum of $2.165 million, excluding GST. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'll call to the councillors. Will they vote as they wish? All those for? Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 7. Housing rights are human rights, social and affordable housing strategy 2018 to 2025, withdrawn by Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the recommendation that Council 1 approve Cardinia's Social and Affordable Housing Strategy and Action Plan 2018 to 2025 to be presented, as presented to Council for endorsement, and 2, include an additional recommendation into the strategy to strongly advocate to state government to mandate social and affordable housing for all future residential development.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Can I have a seconder, please, for item 7? Councillor Schilling. Back to you, Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you again. I'm very pleased to withdraw and speak about the affordable and social and affordable housing strategy and action plan tonight. The draft social and affordable housing strategy and action plan were placed on a public exhibition from October the 22nd to November the 21st last year, and Council received 3 submissions, which have all been considered as part of the final document that is being presented for endorsement this evening. All 3 submissions were supportive of the strategy, and a summary of those submissions and Council's responses is included in the report. The Cardinia Social and Affordable Housing Strategy and Action Plan is the first of its kind for Cardinia, with its fundamental premises being that housing rights are human rights. The strategy is underpinned by the Human Rights Framework and local government's obligations under the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities Act 2006, reflecting that the provision of adequate housing is an essential human need. The evidence within the strategy confirms that Cardinia Shire lacks sufficient, appropriate and affordable housing for lower income residents, and that without interventions and investment, the situation will only get worse. A recent article in the Pakenham Gazette titled "Rental Stress at a Peak in Pakenham" referred to figures in the state government's recent rental report that indicated that when looked at closely, the figures showed that as of September 2018, there were 0 affordable 1-bedroom homes and only 3 affordable 2-bedroom homes in the Pakenham area. The strategy and the action plan reflects Council's commitment to ensuring all residents in the Shire have access to safe, affordable and secure housing that meets their needs. Development of the strategy is a key recommendation arising from the 2016 study commissioned by Council on the nature of homelessness within the Shire. The strategy is framed by and progresses several key council strategies, in particular Council's Livability Plan 2017 to 29. By addressing key livability factors, the Council ultimately aims to address health and social outcomes for the community. The Livability Plan identified the following housing vision in accordance with this objective. And that is, Cardinia Shire encourages diverse, high quality and sustainable housing, affordable for all, in close proximity to employment, education, goods and services and open space, which is connected by active travel infrastructure and meets the needs of a growing and diverse community. The strategy also aligns and builds on Cardinia Shire's Housing Strategy 2013 to 2018, which establishes the local housing objectives and strategies in relation to the land use planning role of council. This strategy reflects recent changes in Planning and Environment Act 1987 and places clearer emphasis on councils to advocate the provision of affordable housing as an objective of planning and provide enhanced support and guidance for voluntary negotiations between councils and landowners to secure affordable housing outcomes. The strategy is informed by current reliable data, research and consultation with the support of DELP and the DHHS. It also upholds our commitment to the Together We Can program and supports Council's Access and Inclusion Policy 2017, Cardinia's Age-Friendly Strategy for 2015-19, and the Child, Youth and Family Strategy 2017 to 2021. Council was successful in securing a $144,780 grant from DHHS through the Social Housing Investment Planning Grant program. The grant will fund a part-time project officer to undertake a feasibility study identifying the social housing needs, a land register identifying possible land which might be suitable for social housing project, as well as the implementation of the strategy and action plan. The funding is for 12 months and will finish in October this year. Additional funding needed to implement the strategy for the 9 months from September this year to June of next year, being 2020, is being considered as part of the budget of the operating budget deliberations. The 22 actions supporting this strategy will be implemented over the next 7 years with a review in 2021. This will ensure that Council is on track to achieve the targets, and it gives an opportunity to update actions to respond to changing federal and state policy context and any new or emerging issues or opportunities. Emphasis is placed on actions that align with Council's role as leader and advocate, land use planner, social planner and community developer. Through the implementation of the recommendations in the strategy and action plan, Council will develop partnerships with service providers, state and federal governments, as well as other stakeholders to tackle this serious social issue. And before I hand over to my seconder to speak, I'd like to thank and congratulate the staff that have been involved with the development of this strategy. I know they're passionate about this issue, and it's reflected in the quality of information and data contained within the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. I'll now hand over to Councillor Schilling, the seconder. Thank you, Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Wilmot, as well for that report and for moving that. It's important piece of work that Council have embarked on, and it's very important that we do get it started. And I'd also like to thank you as well for your passion and determination on the issue of affordable housing and social justice within the Shire. Look, as I just said, for our growing community, this strategy has never been more important than it is right now. As a council, I don't think we're ever going to be able to completely solve the housing crisis, but it will go a long way in laying down some of the foundations that our communities most vulnerable need to be able to live in a safe, reliable and affordable housing as well. I feel the real power in this strategy, and once again I encourage people to read it, is about our ability to be able to advocate to state and federal governments for improved funding and access to local services within the community. And there has been some investment from different levels of government, and we're starting to see projects starting to trickle through, and one example just off the top of my head would be the $1.3 million we received recently for the Story Drive project. So it's on the government's radar, and our ability to advocate will really be important, particularly as we have parcels of land which are going on the market. There's also a big role, as Councillor Wilmot spoke about, and I won't speak in as much detail on it because she covered it so well, is for our planning team, particularly around negotiating with our developers. As we are looking to secure that 2% of affordable housing in every development over 100 lots. So being able to advocate and get that on board is a great way forward. We know that social housing works best when we're able to spread it across a large area. And as we have estates coming on board, that will be something that, if we're able to do as a council, it's something that will go a long way to helping the lives of some of our communities most vulnerable. We do have some alarming statistics in this Shire, which did come about from the research Councillor Wilmot was speaking about, a study which we commissioned as a council, and that is around the shortage of affordable homes, being in excess of 2,000 dwellings. That's combined with an estimated 220 people being considered homeless in our community. This is a dire situation. 220 people not having a place to call home, not having a roof over their head tonight, just in our Shire. It's a terrible situation. So, look, for those reasons, that's why I'm going to completely support this strategy moving forward and finding a way to address our chronic shortage of housing, which is projected to get worse. The research spoke a little bit about incomes in the Shire and what it takes to be able to afford rent. And there's a figure which I've highlighted in the report here, and that is for a single person to be able to afford $146 a week rent. I mean, you don't rent $146. The caravan park in Pakenham is more than $146 a week in rent. That's an income of $25,000 just to be able to afford $146 worth of rent, and to be able to afford a house for $102,000. That just doesn't happen. And that figure of $25,000 highlights to us that's the councillor's allowance. None of us could live off our councillor's allowance, which is a fact, isn't it? It's would be impossible to do that. So if I look at that figure, you look at one adult, you look at some of the cheapest rent in the Shire is about $300 a week. That leaves $184 for bills, food and transport for somebody on that wage of $25,000 on that lowest income. Look, the strategy, it's a great read, and I too like to congratulate the staff who have written this strategy, and all of the councillors and community members and service agencies that have come together to make this happen. It hasn't been the effort of one person sitting down behind a computer. There's been years of research to get this just right, and I'm very proud of this strategy. It's very easy to read and understand, and I'll definitely be supporting it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Any other speakers on this item, on item 7? Councillor Jodie Owen.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll also be very brief with this. Again, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Wilmot on the work she's done in this area and the effort she's put in to also ensure that the staff feel supported. And I've got to second what Councillor Schilling said. For mine, it blows, like I've been talking to different people and some in planning. It's wonderful to see these townhouses going up. They look beautiful. They really do. But what happens when you can't climb stairs anymore? What happens when you can't tend a large garden or a large backyard? They're all things that can happen. I know some people who come to council meetings and watch us online believe where there's bleeding heart stories that don't get it. Oh, we get it. And it's not just about those who have got crisis. It's not about that at all. As Councillor Schilling said, to live off $25,000 a year, you're not in a house. You're going down to Burke Park one night a week to hopefully get a warm meal and hope that someone might let you live on a couch for a week. This piece of work is so important, and it is absolutely vital right now before our population gets to a point when, and then we'll be at a point where we can't support them at all. So I'll definitely be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Ray Brown. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be supporting this motion. I think we use the word critical a little bit haphazardly, but I think it's a word that should be used in this respect, because it is critical. It's absolutely critical to see people homeless, to be walking around with no roof over their head. I support Councillor Owen regarding the townhouses, but I think if we could get some advocacy to build those type of, perhaps not the big townhouses, but that type of construction, instead of trying to use independent housing blocks, which land is at a premium, would be a good thing. The cost of rental in this town is averaging out around about $300 a week. It's virtually unaffordable for most. We take great pride of 7 families a day moving into our Shire. I hope they're going into housing. I hope they maintain their housing and they don't get thrown on the homeless list because they can't afford what they're getting into, but that's another story. I'd also like to commend the officers that have worked on this report, and Councillor Wilmot, because I know it's very close to her heart. I'm very passionate about it as well, because I have people that I know that haven't got a roof over their heads. So I think anything that we could do, we advocate. I think if we've got land, we should make it available for public housing. Get the thing done, just don't talk about it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Brett Owen, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for your passionate speeches on this. I definitely want to highlight, the lack of effort and will from other governments in this space. Like, we're not seeing them provide public housing out in Cardinia. No new housing, really. It is minimal, very minimal. And with our growing population, that cannot be acceptable. We need to see investment from other governments for social housing and public housing. There is long waiting lists, and I also know people very close to my heart that are in this space as well. That renting is difficult, and when you've got 60 people turning up to rent a house, to hopefully get that house, is a real issue. And so I reiterate everyone's comments and your passion on it, and I just want the other governments to, just to provide assistance with Cardinia, to Cardinia. We're not seeing that investment, and that's one of the advocacy items. The action items is 6.4.5 is to continue to work with existing local service providers, and also 6.47 advocate to Commonwealth and state governments for an increased investment in social and affordable housing supplied by. So we will continue to advocate, and it's about time other governments stepped up to the plate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Brett Owen. Before I move back to the mover, which is Councillor Wilmot, I would like to say that you have to go down to Burke Park to understand what we're facing. You go down there Tuesday nights and Thursday nights down to Burke Park, as I do. I've been a few times. I visit there quite often, and it's quite an amazing place to, if you want acknowledgement of what's happening within our community, that's where you go. And I must say, Councillor Brett Owen, I agree wholeheartedly. Other government bodies, it's their responsibility. They've got to acknowledge there is a problem, and we've been left with this problem. And here we are tonight. I can feel the passion in the room here. Everyone's involved in this, and we're going to work together as a council on this particular item. And I want to thank you, Councillor Wilmot, for your thoughts in withdrawing this. And I know you've had a big input into this particular item. So on that, I will go back to you to sum up. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your support and your comments on this strategy. And you're all right. This is a serious issue. And in fact, in 2014, it was one of my aspirations that we take a serious look at the homelessness situation within our Shire and look at ways of tackling the issue. And I did that because at that time I became aware of a lady within my community who was in her early 60s, and because the property and the little shack that she used to rent had been sold and it was no longer available to her. So she found herself in a position where she couldn't afford to rent another property. And she was living in a little shack. It had holes in the windows and it wasn't really fit for anybody to live in, but that was what she could afford. So for quite a long time, a couple of years, she couch surfed. I think the situation's changed slightly now, thankfully. But it was something that I was seeing quite often. There was also a car that I would regularly see parked outside the library at Emerald that was stacked to the roof with clothing and objects. It was obvious that somebody was living in that car. And unfortunately, about 12 months later, I found out who that was, and it was a young man that went to school with my son. Anyway, I'll get off that subject because it does make me emotional. But since moving that, since having that aspiration, there's been a lot of work and research done to develop this strategy, as well as some of the other strategies that we talked about earlier. So I am pleased and I'm proud that we've got this strategy now and that it's before us tonight for endorsement. This is a serious social issue and it has major health and financial consequences for everybody. Everybody bears the brunt of this, and I believe that Council has an important role, along with the other levels of government, but we have the role of addressing this issue at our own local level, and that's a very important role that we need to step up to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. I think all the room is feeling your pain tonight. Councillors, will we signify in the usual manner? All those for this item? For? Carried. Item 8 is the dissolution of the Emerald Village Committee, withdrawn by Councillor Wilmot. Again, Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you. I move the recommendation that Council resolve to dissolve the Emerald Village Committee previously formed under the provisions of Section 86 of the Local Government Act.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brett Owen. Back to you, Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. This is actually quite a good news story, this movement here. It's not that the committee has fallen apart and we don't have a committee anymore. It's that the village committee have decided to become an incorporated association and to stand under their own umbrella, if you like. Now, the reason that they've come to this decision was mid last year they started to discuss the possibility of producing their own newsletter and community newsletter, both through a printed but mainly as an online e-letter. But they weren't able to do that under their deed of delegation as the Section 86 committee. It wasn't permitted. So they're very enthusiastic about this idea and they have some fantastic ideas of where they're going with this. So I wish them all the luck under the sun because it'll be fantastic if they can get it up and moving. But they had to come to some decision. They either drop the project or they find a different way of doing it, and they decided to become an association under their own steam so that they can produce this newsletter. And I congratulate them on that. That's not an easy decision to make because there are costs involved in being an incorporated association, insurances, etc., etc. So it is a big burden for these committees. They don't actually get too much funding and they have limited avenues to make money. So hats off to them. At the inaugural meeting in January, all 3 ward councillors were there and we will continue to support this new association. That's not going to change. Council staff will also continue. There's been a agreement signed by our CEO and the president of the committee that everything will stay the same. We will still work with them and conduct business with them as we always have. But I sat down before the inaugural meeting and sort of reflected over the last 7 years of attending their meetings, and I came up with a list of just over 30 people that have been part of that committee over the last 7 years. So it's quite a remarkable number of people, and most of them are on there for 3 to 4 years because most of the time through there it was a 2-year term that they would serve. So it's a big list, and I wouldn't know where to start adding up how many people have been over the last 20 odd years that it's been in existence, but it'd be an incredible number of people. So congratulations to everybody that is part of this new association, and thank you to everybody who has been part of the Emerald Village Committee as a Section 86 committee over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Second to speak, Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Tish Wilmot, for summing that up very well. Definitely, I was also there, as you said, in January, and it was a very positive meeting, no doubt about that. You know, Council was not pushing them, you know, into this process. they decided to go along this path on their own free will, and I think it provides so many opportunities, whether it's that newsletter, applying for other grants, whether it's through council or other government grants, so many opportunities. Being a Section 86, it does have those sort of restraints. You've got to be careful what you say about council. You can't just slag us off. You're constrained by the Section 86. And, people might say, well, is that democratic? If I can't tell, what I think of you publicly or in the media or something. So I think, it opens up that, and that's not a bad thing. We've got similar associations at Beaconsfield, Officer, Upper Beaconsfield, and ward councillors and Gembrook now. Ward councillors still attend their meetings, support them, same as we would a Section 86. But I think it just opens so many opportunities. Yes, you're right, Councillor Wilmot, about insurances, and council has agreed to pay insurance for a few years to assist them. But going forward, in the future, they will need to raise revenue to get obviously insurance coverage and so forth. But so many opportunities, and I think it's a positive move. As we see the end of Emerald Village Committee, we obviously thank everyone that's been on there, but we welcome the future of the new EVA. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowan. Any other speakers? You're very close to the hush button there, Councillor Rowan. No other speakers. I will go back to the mover, Councillor Wilmot, to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. There's not really much more to say. I seriously do hope, though, that as an association they don't take the opportunity to be rude to council or councillors. I'm hoping that we still continue with the great relationship that we've always had. And I think there's great things ahead for this committee. It's a very representative committee. There's representatives from a number of other organisations and committees throughout the town. And there's certainly some big ideas people on this committee. So I'm sure that the passion and drive that they all have they'll achieve great things over the years to come. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor. Okay, we signify in the usual manner tonight. All those for the item? Against? Carried. We move on to item 9. Appointment of the committee members to the Coorab Township Committee and the Cockatoo Township Committee. Also withdrawn by Councillor Letitia Wilmot. Councillor.
Thank you again, Mayor. I'll move the recommendation as listed. I won't go to the trouble of reading all of these names, but yeah, remove it as listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ray Brown. Back to you, Councillor Wilmot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I thought that perhaps you would be the obvious person to second this tonight, and I thank you for that. I really withdrew this item just to thank some of these committee people. The people that have got their names listed here for Cockatoo have been apart from one, have been members of that committee for a number of years, and they work very hard. It's a very small committee, and they put on a number of events, including their Australia Day breakfast that they held recently, and they work really hard throughout the year to do all of that for their communities. And I noticed looking through the names of the Coorab Township Committee, and there's some names on there that I recognise from previous years when this report's come before us. So they again have been around for a lot of years, and it's working for your township. You don't get a lot of thanks usually, but I just wanted to take the opportunity while we have it to thank them all for their work, and all community members that work, whether it's on a township committee or an association. Community groups, they all work for the betterment of their communities. It's not so much for a sporting club or anything, it's they're working for their whole community and everything within their community. So I thank them all.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Ray Brown to speak.
Thank you, Mayor, and I endorse Councillor Wilmot's comments. I was chairman of the Coorab Township Committee for 12 years, and I didn't get the memo that we weren't allowed to slag off at council or anything like that. I never got the memo. And I was, we were able to make, he's going for the button. But I'd like to say, Coorab Township Committee celebrated 20 years last year, and the Township Committee realised at a very early stage how valuable the Township Committee was in respect of being that conduit between the community and council, how we were able to get close to council officers and they used to come to the meetings and we were given guidance and it was nothing but positive. And when I see the names here, you're right, a few of them have been on for a long time. Cockatoo, some of those people there I've seen have been on for a fair while as well. They give up their time, they come along, we chat about a lot of things, a lot of it not relevant, but we try the best we can to keep it relevant. But they come up with some good ideas. They think, and those ideas obviously often get translated into actions. I can't speak for Cockatoo, but I can say for Coorab Township Committee, the natural gas, the bypass, the clocks, all of those things were all generated by the Township Committee. So they do have a very, very important role to play in the community. And I'd just like to thank and congratulate these people on their appointment, in some cases reappointments. Thank you, Mayor.
Fantastic, Councillor. Thank you. Any other speakers either for or against this item? I go back to the mover, Councillor Wilmot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And like Councillor Brown, I spent many years on the Cockatoo Township Committee, and yeah, thinking back, there's a lot of projects that we started as a Township Committee, and some of those are now actually projects that are rolled out statewide, including there's a new one started in Coorab this year, which is part of the Ready to Go program, and that was a Cockatoo Township Committee project. So, and now it's statewide. So they do achieve a lot of really good stuff, and it's because they're dealing with issues at that grassroots level and they're living with it. They know the best ways around these things. So they are to be valued highly, and we're very lucky to have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot, and thank you, Councillor Brown. Yes, you can. I will allow that, Councillor Brown.
When you were on the committee, did you get the memo?
Councillor Brown, yes, I did get the memo because I was always taught that you get far more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Thank you, both councillors. I think that the term slagging should be taken off the list of the minutes. Thank you, Mr Evans. Thank you. Councillors, can we vote accordingly? All those for? Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 11, the quarterly report. Implementation of the council resolutions withdrawn by Councillor Brett Owen. Councillor Owen, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that council note the report detailing the implementation of council resolutions for the period October to December 2018.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Schilling. Back to you, Councillor Brett Owen. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Schilling. And really pleased that this is a new report, and it's something that I've been really keen to see. We know motions get actioned. We know that, but we don't often, unless you ask, what happened with those. Any updates. So it's really great to see that, particularly around, if councillors put in a notice of motion themselves or amended alternate resolution or motion, to see what were the outcomes of that. And this report does that. So I think that is really great. And I just wanted to highlight a few things and just provide an update on a number of different things. So on page 291, it relates to a resurfacing contract where myself put in an alternative motion because there was unsatisfactory works in Beaconsfield that was done, in my opinion, from the previous contract. And before we were accepting this tender, I wanted to ensure that rectification works were done. So an update is reported, but I just want to add to that, Council has received the proposed method of rectification from the contractor, and we are meeting on Wednesday to review the method to ensure that we are confident in its ability to resolve this issue. Works expected to commence early March. Rectification works to include, but not limited to, either an application of additional 7mm stone, sandwich seal or high-strength seal binders. The contractor will be notifying all affected residents before works commence. So, good update. Definitely there was unsatisfactory works in Beaconsfield, and I know it well. My neighbours raise with me on a regular basis, and also social media in Beaconsfield. So to rectify that, it's a really good thing. In relation to the Beaconsfield car parking strategy on page 295, there was an alternative motion. So it's great that we've commenced. We wrote letters to residents. We wrote letters to the Minister and other MPs, including the member for Bass and Narre Warren South, seeking an audience with the Minister. So we are waiting a response from the Minister in relation to that's improving car parking at the Beaconsfield Railway Station. So that's progressing, which is good. Notice a motion on mine, 1042, in relation to Public Transport Victoria, where we had an issue with the bus replacement service of the train network not going to the Officer Railway Station, which causes real concern that people have to walk, if they're going to park at the railway station, 700 metres to the highway, and that's unsafe and
I didn't do it.
darkness. We've got a kill switch on the lights as well. That's good. So we wrote to the Minister in relation to that, to improve that bus replacement service. So we await a response. In relation to notice the motion 1043, which relates to the officer kiln, where councillors have concern in relation to that kiln, and we wrote to the Minister for Planning. So I'll just respond to that. So the Minister has written to the Mayor has written to the Minister for Planning, seeking support to protect the officer kiln, which is under threat through neglect and exposure to the weather. The Minister's office has acknowledged this letter and has also expressed concern over the loss of heritage. Council officers are currently looking at all options available to Council to protect this important asset as part of officers' past industrial heritage. Council will be getting a further briefing next week by officers on the progress of what is possible for Council to preserve this. So that's really good to get that update. So in summary, I think this is a great report. It ensures councillors that things have been actioned and provides an update to where things sit with those actions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Schilling to speak as a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think it's a good addition. It's a great addition to the reports and does give a great overview of what Council have achieved. I was looking through, obviously this is the first one that we've gotten. A lot of people, probably the public side to Council is going out to events and all that sort of stuff, and you're going to community meetings, which is great, but the bulk of a councillor's time is actually spent reading, by far. Like even this week, we had 404 pages of this and a few hundred pages of briefing papers. A lot is spent, hours upon hours upon hours is spent reading, and hours upon hours sending emails as well. So it's actually quite good to be able to look back and actually see as a council what we have achieved, because sometimes it's quite easily to be caught up in a cycle of reading, research, so to actually see some outcomes for all of the behind the scenes work, all the meetings with officers, your hours of reading, it's actually great to see the community outcomes and start to see things, coming up, being built, and outcomes happening which are there for the community, which is why we're all here. So I support the report, and I look forward to getting it every quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Any other speakers on this item? No other speakers. I'll go back to the mover. Councillor Brett Owen, back to you.
No further, thank you.
Okay. Okay, councillors, we'll be signifying in the usual manner. Those for the item? Against? Carried. We'll move to item 15. And by the way, that's what the looks like. That's the amount of pages we're talking about. I'm going to talk about that afterwards. I'm going to ask the CEO to speak about the amount of paper we use. Back to item 15. For major projects and strategies activities report, also back to Councillor Brett Owen. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the report be noted.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Schilling. Back to you, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to be brief, but it's a good report. Highlights where we are at with a number of major projects and policies around the Shire. So across the road at the Officer Rec Reserve number 2, the Western Naval Reconstruction, residents would be able to see that that has commenced, and it's really great. I know Council has been working with the Committee of Management in relation to that project, and they're really keen to see additional dam as part of this works because water is expensive, and the Committee of Management was really keen to see additional dams to, obviously that water will water the rec reserve. So working with them. Great to see the Worrell Reserve Recreation Reserve upgrade is well progressed. I think we're just waiting for the grass to grow. It's amazing. If you look at that reserve and you see, it used to be called the potato chip with the bends and the turns and the surface, but now it is a beautiful surface. But we've got a massive retaining wall which just sort of popped out of nowhere, but it was required because of just the fall of the oval was just unbelievable. So it's amazing bit of infrastructure, so I encourage people to have a look at it, but that's warmly welcome. Rangers Ward Councillors inspected the progress of the Hills Hub, I think a few weeks ago. It was really great, so that's really progressing really well. Council's obviously working on the management of what that's going to look like, and we'll report that further, but that is expected to be completed by September this year. So a lot of work to be done still, but it's on track. And finally, we talk about Kenilworth all the time. I know residents, this is Kenilworth Avenue, I know councillors continue to get emails and officers continue to get emails, and I know residents are frustrated, and trust me, I'll share that frustration, but as the report says, council officers have been able to broker a deal between the developer and the contractor which was agreed to by all parties prior to Christmas. It is anticipated that once all of the requirements of the agreement have been met, that construction will commence shortly, and I do look forward to that day. I know it's frustrating, but can I just reassure residents and users of that road that council is doing everything we can to progress that and recommence those construction works for sealing of Kenilworth. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Thank you. To the seconder, Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors would like to speak on this item? I'll go back to the mover, Councillor Owen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. No further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I'll ask our councillors to vote in the usual manner. All those for? Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. And I would like to mention about the gallery for being very patient tonight. It's been a long meeting, and I must admit, but it's been worthy, and we've actually had good debate here tonight. But it just shows you what difference 2 weeks make. Like the last meeting we had lasted 2 minutes, so we've made up for it tonight, I can tell you. So anyway, that concludes discussions on the items withdrawn tonight. Can I have a motion, please, to adopt the recommendations for the balance of the items listed? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Jodie Owen, a seconder, Councillor Ray Brown. All those in favour? Carried. Reports or minutes of committees. I note that there's several reports from various committees have been tabled in addition to the minutes of recent council briefing sessions, and these are available if any councillor wishes to view them. Councillor reports. Councillors, any matters to report? Presentation. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilmot. I didn't. Yes. Have you got something to report, Councillor Wilmot? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I was waiting to see if Councillor Owen was going to say something. I'm sorry. And I won't steal your thunder. I just wanted to mention that on the 19th of January I did attend Mike Ellery's memorial service, and I just wanted to mention that there's a really good article if anybody's interested in this month's Emerald Messenger. There's a copy here. I'll leave it in the councillors' lounge, so if anybody wants to read it, it's just a summary of some of the things that were said at his memorial service. It was quite a jovial occasion. There was lots of really good funny stories told from his sister as well as his son, and it just provides a little summary of it. Also just wanted to make a very quick mention and to thank our CEO who attended our first tourism board meeting this year. Our CEO, Carol Jeffs, and the Casey CEO also attended, where they were given a brief summary of what we're working towards, what we've already achieved, and what our plans are in the future, and they offered some advice from their perspective as well, and some guidance on where they thought we should be heading in the future as well. So thank you for that, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Any other speakers on reports? Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Letitia Wilmot. Definitely, I was going to mention that. I know the Mayor was going to make some comments too, but I asked if I could say these comments. So, in January, we saw the passing of Mike Ellery, and he was the 2017 Senior Citizen of the Year, and that was the year that I was Mayor, and it was great to award the award to Mike. And Mike is a very unique character for anyone who's met him. So for more than 30 years, Mike Ellery, or Michael Ellery, combined his trades, knowledge and skills with his passion for helping others to significantly improve the lives, confidence, resilience and prospects of those impacted by disasters or disadvantage, particularly men's health. It's fair to say he was really focusing on men's health and, through the men's shed. In both his paid employment and volunteer work, Michael helped local youth obtain trade skills at Emerald Secondary College, promoted tourism, participated in Youth 3A, served on the Emerald Village Committee and coordinated the Emerald Men's Shed for almost a decade. Through his involvement in the Men's Shed, Michael has assisted many local groups, including SES, RSL, Fernley House, as well as helping those who had lost everything in the Black Wednesday and Black Saturday, it must be Ash Wednesday, and Black Saturday bushfires, disasters. So on this note, I just want to acknowledge Mike Ellery and his amazing work that he did, particularly around men's health. A very unique character and heavily involved in the Hills Hub sort of design process in relation to the men's shed component and the U3A. So just wanted to note that. Also, great news. I think it was a couple of weeks ago now, Council received advice from the federal government in relation to some funding announcements. And that was $13 million for the intersection improvements at the Monash Freeway and McGregor Road intersections. Obviously, they're the on-ramp, so that will produce a full diamond interchange. So westbound ramps, and we know that has been advocated for a long time, probably since the freeway was installed. A lot of us were amazed that wasn't completed. But so $13 million for that full diamond interchange. And also $17.8 million for the intersection upgrades along the Princess Highway from Glissman Road to Thulis Road. So these intersections are Beaconsfield Avenue, Glissman Road intersection, O'Neill Road intersection, Brunt Road, Whiteside Road, Bayview Road intersection, Timmerdale Road, Station Street intersection, McMullen Road, Arena Parade and Thulis Road. So these projects will improve road conditions for our community, relieve congestions, reduce delays and improve safety conditions. Council is waiting for the funding agreement to be forwarded from the Minister's Office, which will outline timeframes of receiving funds and require delivery timelines. Our engineering department is eagerly waiting for this document, with planning and road designs already completed for these intersections. So Council is anxious to start the tendering process to ensure on-the-ground works occur as soon as possible. So I want to thank obviously SLT and particularly the CEO, the mayors over many years advocating for these. Great news, and I know particularly around the intersections we've already sort of touched base with Vic Roads in relation to progressing these, and I know O'Neill Road is a real concern. And last Monday there was 2 instances, one about 4 I think, and then another one about 5:30, where 2 motor vehicle collisions occurred at O'Neill Road and Old Princess Highway in Beaconsfield. So just last week, council officers, I was in attendance, and the mayor met with Vic Roads to really progress that intersection, also the others. So I look forward to providing further updates in the future, but great news. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Any other reports from councillors? I'd just like to say, Councillor Owen and Councillor Wilmot, thank you for your kind words about Mike Allery. I know he's leaving a hole in my heart, and certainly a big hollow in our community, particularly up in that Emerald area, and I couldn't think of 2 other people that could speak about him better than both of you, because he was a fantastic larrikin, and I'm going to miss that infectious smile in our groups, really. Yeah. Okay, now I'll move on to presentation of petitions. Councillor Schilling, I understand that you have a petition to table. Would you like to speak on the prayer, or would you like to speak on it?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Do I need to get a seconder for this, or can I just talk to it?
No, you don't need to have a seconder. You can talk to it straight. Thanks.
Fantastic. So this is a petition I was given by a Pakenham resident, and I'll read it out to you. Let's put traffic lights on Tumac Valley Road, Princess Highway. Hi everyone, my name is Romana. I'm in Year 9 and doing a petition on putting traffic lights on Tumac Valley Road. Tumac Valley Road is a dangerous intersection near Thirsty Camel. Why I want to put traffic lights on Tumac Valley Road is because it's way too dangerous. There have been more than 5 crashes in a year. We must put traffic lights on Tumac Valley Road before it is too late. My petition is in the Pakenham Library, Beacon Hills College reception, also online on change.org. And the actual petition itself is titled Signal Lights at Tumac Valley Road, Princess Highway. It is getting dangerous near the intersection of Tumac Valley Road and Princess Highway, and we need to put traffic lights. I'd like to congratulate Romana on her huge effort in getting this petition done. We live in a generation, I guess we don't live in a generation, but so much as councillors we see people constantly will type a comment on a Facebook post about an issue and we'll just leave it at that. Romana is a true example of a young resident who has stepped up to the plate, has seen an issue and has decided to do something about it in the form of this petition. There are hundreds of signatures in this petition, all handwritten. I'm assuming some would be from her local school, Beacon Hills, as I read out, and some from members of the community as well. And I agree with Romana in what she's asking. If you go out to Tumac Valley Road on school hours, particularly between 3 and quarter to 4, you're not going to be able to get out very easily. It's an absolute nightmare for residents. And it's been long spoken about as being well and truly overdue for a signalised intersection. So I think Romana should be very, very proud of herself, and I'd like to encourage more people in the community. If you see there's something you're not happy with, lobby for it. Lobby for it and try your very best to try and get an outcome. So I'd just like to table this petition tonight, and so next council meeting, I believe council will have an official response for Romana, which I'll be able to speak on at the March General Council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Yes, I've also spoken to the young lady involved in this, and it is an important intersection. It is to come out of there. So it's a worthy project, and I congratulate her on her efforts and the community for signing the petition and for you tabling it too for Mr. Evans to reply at the next council meeting. Yeah, that's right. Correct. Well done. Thank you. Any other reports from councillors? Okay. Let's move on to community question time. And I want to thank the community again for being patient. We have received a question from Scott Nimmo. Scotty, is Mr. Nimmo in the gallery? May you identify yourself? Thank you. Thank you. I'll refer your question or questions to Acting General Manager of Community Wellbeing to read the question and the answers for you, and you may receive a written answer if you prefer. Mrs. Kristen Jackson, will you please answer the question? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your question, Scotty. Your question was, the IYU Recreation Reserve is a combined soccer and athletics facility. Is there any timeline on the funding for stage 3 of this project to deliver the much needed all-weather athletic facility at this site? What is Council's actual intention for stage 3? Consultation with the local Little Athletics and senior athletics clubs has stalled. Yes, you're quite correct that the master plan which Council endorsed for the IYU site includes the development of an athletics facility. An allocation for the detailed design of that facility and then implementation has been put forward for consideration as part of the draft 5-year capital works program, which is currently being developed. The draft capital works program is scheduled to be released for public comment in April, but it generally only includes the next financial year, which will be the 2019-20 financial year capital works program. But however, any interested community members are able to make submissions on the draft capital works program. It's also worth noting too that it's only the next year's capital works program that gets officially approved by Council. So the following years remain in draft form until the year before when they're officially adopted. But extensive consultation will be undertaken with both the senior and the little athletics clubs when the detailed design funding is allocated in a future capital works budget. So thank you for your question.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Thank you. Scotty, you can actually speak to Ms. Jackson after the meeting if you prefer. And like I said before, the opportunity to have a written response to take back to the club if you prefer. Okay, thank you. And thank you for your questions and your answers to Kristen. We've also received 4 questions from Mrs. Gloria O'Connor, and I recognise and see Ms. O'Connor in the gallery. Nice to see you, Gloria. I'll refer your first question to Acting General Manager, Assets and Services, Deb Tyson. Ms. Tyson, can you read the question and respond to Mrs. O'Connor's question? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gloria, your question was, council neglect of rural roads is becoming more and more evident. Mary Knoll report this week in the paper, and I personally travelled over the many others in very bad conditions. Does Cardinia Shire Council realise that the large rural part of the municipality requires ongoing maintenance? The community is entitled to have their better road conditions despite weather conditions, and revenue collected from ratepayers should be available for this work. Bear with me for a second. I sent it to Doug. Doug, you got that response? Thank you. My apologies, I thought Doug was going to read this out for me. Thank you. So in response, Council maintains 863 kilometres of unsealed roads throughout the municipality, and we are acutely aware that the performance of parts of unsealed road network is a great concern and frustration to some of our residents and road users. The maintenance and response of our unsealed roads are undertaken in accordance with the Road Management Plan. Council acknowledges the need to improve the network for our road users. We have started a 6-month transition from a reactive program to a predictive maintenance program, reinforced by an updated road management plan, which was adopted by Council in December. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie Tyson. Thank you for the answer, question and answer. And also goes the same, Mrs. O'Connor, that you can have these answers in writing if you prefer, and so you can put them on record. Gloria, I refer your next question to Acting General Manager of Community Wellbeing, Kristen Jackson, to read and answer your question. Kristen Jackson, please.
Thank you for your question, Ms. O'Connor. The question is, why is Council not willing to fund a toilet facility as required for the Pakenham Rotary Park, which is a great community facility and so well managed by the Pakenham Rotary Club volunteers and fundraising? Again, it should be funded by revenue that Council receives from ratepayers. Council has agreed to the Rotary proposal to install a toilet facility in this location. It is a Rotary Club proposal, and at no time has Rotary actually requested Council to fund the toilet facility. In fact, Rotary are discussing funding of it with the state and federal bodies. But Rotary has asked Council for assistance with funding the actual connection of the toilet facility and also ongoing maintenance of the toilet, which Council has agreed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen Jackson. Thank you. Gloria, I refer to your next question again to Acting General Manager of Community Wellbeing, Kristen Jackson. Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. O'Connor, your third question was, does it seem that Council is currently so obsessed with the need for urban growth, social housing and its ongoing requirements that priorities are not being fairly considered? All decisions regarding social and affordable housing have been evidence-based and considered within the scope of population growth and social and health challenges facing our local families. Research and data analysis informing decision-making around social and affordable housing has relied on 3 key documents. In 2016, Council undertook extensive consultation across the community and with partner social and health organisations and identified housing as a key policy domain in Council's Cardinia Shire's Livability Plan 2017 to 2025. Then in 2017, Council undertook extensive social research on housing, homelessness and financial vulnerability within the Shire, titled The Nature and Extent of Homelessness, Risk of Homelessness and Financial Vulnerability. And this study identified that there is a lack of safe, secure and affordable housing for disadvantaged families within our Shire. This report also recommended that Council develop a social and affordable housing strategy to guide all future decision-making across the Shire. Then in 2018, Cardinia's first social and affordable housing strategy was developed, and in the course of developing this strategy, data analysis revealed a critical shortage of affordable housing for very low and low-income households across a number of population cohorts, such as women and children, people with disabilities, seniors and youth. And this evening you actually saw Council endorse Cardinia's first social and affordable housing strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. That's well answered. Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions. I'll refer your last question onto Gloria, onto the Chief Executive Officer, Carol Jeffs. Ms. Jeffs, can you answer the question? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Ms. O'Connor's fourth question is, can you please provide information regarding any changes in the administrative section of Cardinia Shire Council, whereby there are some new officers and managers in place, and it is important for the community to be aware of these changes. So some members of our community would be aware that our General Manager Corporate Services, Derek Madden, resigned to take up a role as the CEO at Moorabool Shire, And our General Manager Assets and Services, Mike Ellis, is in a transition to retirement as at last week. And you would also perhaps observe that we have some very capable leaders in this organisation, such as Ms Jackson and Ms Tyson, who are around this table, who have been appointed in acting capacities while these roles are vacant. So I hope to be advertising vacant roles in the next few weeks, and we'll update Council's website so that everybody can understand who they are. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Carol Jeffs, our CEO, for the answer to the question. And you'll receive those answers as well, Gloria. Before closing tonight's meeting, I'd just like to bring up an administration item that we've discussed about the printing of material here and what we have in our midst of being a non-paper council. And so I'd just like to hand over to our CEO, Carol Jeffs, just to report on an item that we had on, particularly the papers this evening. Thank you, CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to advise the gallery here tonight and community more broadly of an intention to replace paper copies of the agenda at council meetings with electronic agendas in the form of tablets, in order to save paper and costs and to be consistent with our paperless philosophy here at Cardinia Shire Council. And Mr Mayor held this bundle of paper up earlier. This is tonight's agenda, which has some colour copies in it as well, which costs $30.20 each copy to produce. And we usually produce 5 of those each meeting. So it's, it's not a huge amount of money, but we'd like to try something different. As you know, transparency and participation is really very important, in fact critical to the council. And most would know that the agenda's online ahead of the meeting, and staff would be available to assist gallery members. And I'll be happy also to talk to anyone after the meeting should you wish. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Carol Jeffs, our CEO. And I have the support of my fellow councillors on this particular item, and it's and I think it's about time we address that issue. Yep. So, councillors, before closing tonight's meeting, I'd like to advise that we're not going to be holding a town planning committee meeting on Monday the 4th of March. That is for the gallery as well. There are no planning applications that require deliberation by the committee, and therefore no reason to convene the meeting. So the town planning meeting for the first Monday of March will not be happening. So the gallery who usually come can have the night off. And the councillors can as well. So that concludes tonight's proceedings. I want to thank everybody for their attendance, and I also offer the staff will be here to speak to about the questions if they want to tonight after the meeting. So I declare the meeting closed, and thank you for your attendance. Thanks.